So on with the next load of PS1 games. Just today, I'm just going to talk about the shift from racing games to sort of more adventure games, sort of where you're controlling a character. And this is where games got a little violent, and even worse, tank controls. So this started with, I think it started with me renting Silent Hill once. I read a review in a PlayStation magazine, and back then I needed a guide to play it. But yeah, I loved it. I loved the weapons. I loved the imagination, like how imaginative the world was, and uh, yeah, um, yeah, it's just a really good game for those who don't know. Silent Hill. A man crashes his car in a town which turns out to be a ghost town, which has two realities. So I'm not talking about Soul Reaver here. I'm talking about Silent Hill, though they do have two different versions of each world. They sort of and this world you don't control when it changes. It changes when it wants. One's sort of a normal world with monsters. One's like hell world with more monsters. And yeah, and you must find your daughter Cheryl. You play as Harry Mason. You're looking for your daughter, and I the story's really hard to follow. I feel like there's a lot missing, but there is something there. It's just I get the feeling there's a lot of things that might have been missing. The 2006 film, sort of simplifies it down to a witch burning plot, but it keeps a lot of things like there's a character in the film called Thomas Gucci, and you go into the police station in Silent Hill. There's an article about Detective Gucci, and yeah, so you can tell the person who made the film loved the game more than me, most likely. But yeah, that's the introduction to something called tank controls, where you sort of, if you press left, a character just sort of wanders left normally, but in this game, if you press left, it rotates your character around, and that's not the best way to control the characters. It's a little difficult, but in something like Silent Hill and Resident Evil, because they're not as action focused, they're more there is combat, but it's at range, and sometimes at sometimes with like striking weapons, but combat was never really the focus of this game or Resident Evil. Now I think about it, it was more that game's more about shooting and dodging. Yeah, but if you think tank controls are bad in that sort of game, wait until I talk about another game on the list. But we'll come to that a bit later. But yeah, that brings me on to Resident Evil. Now, this was simply a more scientific based game. It's more zombie outbreak caused by science. There's nothing supernatural going on here. At least I heard the game got a little bit more supernatural as we went on. But yeah, this time in Resident Evil 2... Resident Evil 2 was the first one I tried. You play as either Claire or Leon, and you shoot your way through zombies or sometimes dodge them, and then you get dogs and other mutants, and your job is to simply escape the city. I love that game so much that from there I went on to Resident Evil, the first one. Yeah, and that's well known for its bad voice acting, the Jill Sandwich game. Even then, I knew the acting was bad in that game. Like, I mean, it's laughably bad. Like the voice acting, especially. But the first Resident Evil game before the remake, definitely a lot less ammo. You've got to dodge things a bit more. And it's in a pretty spooky mansion, and that which has a science lab there. Eventually you find your way to that. That's just how every Resident Evil game works. Resident Evil 3 was next. That was just playing as Jill Valentine, although you get to play as a guy called Carlos later on. Same thing, But so you play as a character, play as Jill Valentine, who was in the first game. You play as her again, so trying to escape the city. This time's a little bit more movement around streets. You're not just stuck in a big police station or in a big mansion or anything. You get to change locations a lot, but you still somehow find your way at another science lab along the way, and you get the idea. But yeah, great combat. Resident Evil 3 was my favourite, partly because of the ammo. You get to create your own ammo, which was good fun. There was all sorts of good mini games. The mini games were all the puzzles were better. The extra features were better, like playing as the soldiers. Even though I had nothing to do with the story, that was good. Yeah, and just got, I think it got more creative with weapons, and of course Nemesis, the villain you go up against. And if you thought the villain that you go up against in Resident Evil 2 in the B scenario was tough, Nemesis is pretty tough, and he just never stops, and until you get that amazing line, "You want stars, I'll give you stars," from Jill at the end, and even then that's optional. You can just run straight to the helicopter. But yeah, that's the Resident Evil film Apocalypse really didn't know what it was doing. I mean, the game handles Nemesis so much better. Which brings me on to the third game I'm going to talk about, and this was definitely, and the tank controls in this were the one weakness of this game. However, it was a big weakness, and because this game was a lot more hand-to-hand combat focused, or sword combat, Tenchu 2. This has also involved stealth, so you had to sneak up on your enemies and try and one hit kill them. That was so sort of like so that wasn't as much striking, trying to do combos. It was just about sneaking and one hitting, and which is kind of how a lot of games operate today, actually. And because of the tank controls, the boss fights in that game were really hard. I mean, they were just not very well designed, and there were ways around the tank controls. You could sort of you could just hold down the circle button and shift around a little bit, and that could also enable block at the same time. So that found a little way around that, but it was still the tank controls. And I remember even in a and the weird thing is, I then played Tenchu 1 afterwards because I loved this Tenchu 2 so much, which was pretty good, less stealth. But one thing they did was the boss fights in that game. The camera would often move into the boss fights. In Tenchu 2, that you jump cut to boss fights. It was so bad. I mean, I don't know what the game was thinking with that. There was the first boss as your first character, as Rikimaru. If you don't have your sword drawn before you get to the boss fight, you've already lost. That's how difficult that first boss is. The upside is that boss can't block, but that's sort of how the game works. You play as either Rikimaru or Ayame, so you've got a girl or a guy you can play as. And then if you win both of their scenarios, you get to play as a third character, and you get to find out his side of the story. And the story to Tenchu 2 is incredible. It's one of the, out of all the PS1 games I've ever played, it has one of the best stories I've ever experienced. Getting to see the relationship between your two characters you play as and the third character who you get to play as later. It's just an incredible plot. It's incredibly well thought out. It really needs to be a film of some kind. They need to take that plot and make it into a film. So that was Tenchu 2. What more to say about Tenchu 2? Just a really good ninja game. I'll talk about two more games. I'll talk about Soul Reaver, especially since that's going to be remade soon. But yeah, Soul Reaver, you play as a vampire with a lightsaber. Funnily enough, you get your lightsaber later, and you sort of suck souls. It's it's a pretty basic adventure game, but there's a lot of exploration. It makes you think a lot, particularly how to kill the bosses, and yeah, that's another one with the changing worlds, but you control the changing worlds this time. And yeah, it's all the same plot as Kill Bill. Basically, it's the exact same plot, only instead of what's it, the snakes, the assassin named after snakes. They're your brothers, and your master you have to destroy, suck their souls. Yeah, that's you can get the idea of what sort of game that is. You go around killing mutant vampires and in search of your brothers to kill. Yeah, another great game. And I'll just finish by talking about something that meets both driving and adventure. I've got about Driver, made by the same people who did Destruction Derby 2. This was Grand Theft Auto before Grand Theft Auto was a thing. I mean, Grand Theft Auto was a thing, but it was 2D looking down. Driver was like the first of its kind, like the whole 3D open world, driving around, going on like doing missions for like illegal missions and running away from the police and all that. And that was that was a great game. I played a lot. Yeah, couldn't really follow the story very well, but yeah, driving around doing missions, like smashing up cars and getting checkpoints on time. Great game. Really good game. So yeah, some adventure games I used to play. In future, I will be talking a little bit about RPGs. That's going to be another video coming up in the future. And also some other sorts of games that deserve mention. Sports games as well. I'm coming to something with that. But next I'm going to talk a little bit about RPGs, and one RPG which remains one of my favourite games ever. So I'll do that next time. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the RPG video.